Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Ryan. I'm the Consultant Executive Director for the New York State CDFI Coalition. And we are so glad that you could join our discussion today on how CDFIs are making change. While most of you are CDFI executives, we have registrants from across the country. So here's an elevator soundbite of what New York State Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs, do. We provide financial services and education for low-income New Yorkers. We leverage federal and private dollars for economic development. We create market-based solutions that provide capital to chronically underserved communities across the state. And we promote responsible alternatives to predatory loans. Since 1995, the New York State CDFI Coalition has been the organizer and catalyst for strategic initiatives that help CDFIs and the communities they serve. The coalition provides a collective voice, allowing our members to stay locally focused while delivering impact associated with increased scale. That's why we thought it was so important to use our platform to promote this effort. During the height of the pandemic and in response to the protests surrounding the murder of George Floyd, the board of the New York State CDFI Coalition formed a subcommittee to explore options for diversity, equity, and inclusion support for our members. With more than 80 CDFIs in New York State, we knew there would be no one-size-fits-all solution. That's why we've undertaken a 4-part exercise focusing on education, awareness, attitudes, and action. So number 1, education. Many institutions have already launched their own exploration of the DEI landscape, and that continues. Number 2, awareness. Late last year, we conducted a survey of member needs and efforts already underway, which will be explored in facilitated conversations. You are here. Number 3, attitudes. Develop a DEI pledge for New York State CDFIs based on the conversations we're about to have. And number 4, action. Transform words into action through policy like exemplary practices, model underwriting criteria, and the like. So, as we begin our first conversation, I'm going to ask you to join me in thanking US Bank for a grant to support the cost of our Making Change program. It's my pleasure to introduce Marissa Price, MSW, US Bank Community Development Entity Program Manager, New Markets and Historic Tax Credit Investments. Marissa?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay. Thanks so much for the invitation just to say a few words today. My name is Marissa Price. I'm the Program Manager for the US Bank Community Development Entity, or USB CDE, and I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina. But the role of USB CDE is to apply for New Markets tax credits through the CDFI fund. In the event we're successful, we put our allocation towards projects that align with our impact strategy to reduce the racial wealth gap, which we know remains a pressing issue in 2022. Aisha Benson is one of our USB CDE advisory board members and helps guide that strategy. But with every New Markets project that closes, we're able to pool the fee income that we receive and utilize it to make grants to strategically aligned organizations. One of those organizations, of course, is the New York State CDFI Coalition, which we were able to provide a $20,000 grant last year to support DEI training led by Ms. Rutledge. And that is one of the strategic uses of our grant funds. So we're so excited to see this being put to use, and we can't wait to see the results that come out of these facilitated discussions. I just want to thank you all for the important work you do in communities every day. And thank you for having me to speak today.
Thanks so much, Marissa, and thanks again for your support. Before we move on to introducing Jennifer Rutledge, I do want to do a quick round robin and just have everyone on the call very quickly introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask you to unmute as I call on you, if that's okay. So Cliff, why don't you go ahead and go first as our elder statesman?
Okay, so Cliff Rosenthal. So from 1980 to 2012, I was CEO of the organization now known as Inclusive. And since then, I've spent my time writing books, Democratizing Finance being one of them, and working on a current memoir. And also I'm consulting producer for a new PBS series, Opportunity Knocks, which will be broadcast this fall.
Oh, that's new news, Cliff. I want to have a sidebar about that.
It is.
Thank you. Kevin.
I'm Kevin Metlicki. I'm the president and CEO of Alternatives Federal Credit Union in Ithaca, New York. And I've spent about 32 years in credit unions.
Well, you've obviously started when you were 12. Mika.
That's about right.
Folks, I'm Mika Giuseppe. I'm Executive Director of the Cooperative Fund of New England. I'm based right outside of Boston, but we have staff in Schenectady and Ithaca doing a lot of work upstate. Thanks.
Thank you. Chad?
Oh, I'm Chad Seluzniak Service. A business counselor and MWBE specialist at Adirondack Economic Development Corporation out of Saranac Lake. I'm based in Malta, New York. I have an MBA in sustainability and working on my doctorate in business administration in social impact management.
Great.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And happy Earth Day to everyone, speaking of
Yes,
sustainability.
happy Earth Day.
Karen?
Everybody, Karen Haycox, CEO of Habitat for Humanity, New York City and Westchester County, New York, but also is germane to our conversations today, president of Habitat CDFI, known as the Habitat NYC Community Fund, although we lend to affordable housing projects up and down New York State. Nice to be here today. Proud to serve on the board of the coalition and to be part of this committee, although we all know the driving force is Colleen.
Thank you, Karen. And Tom? Oh, I need you to unmute, Tom. Thank you.
I'm Tom Manning. I have been in the CDFI world for about 25 years or so. Helped start a couple of CDFIs, Primary Care Development Corporation, where I was for 20 years or so. And I've been, had my own consulting practice for the past 8 years or so, and doing a lot of work with Karen and New York City Habitat for Humanity and their CDFI.
Thanks, Tom. Charlotte?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Charlotte. I work with Karen for the Habitat for Humanity New York City and Westchester County affiliate. I'm the VP of Housing Services, and I've been working in affordable housing, specifically preservation, mostly co-ops, for a decade. So that's really kind of my world, but I am new to affordable finance and CDFIs from the inside. So I'm also a loan officer with the Habitat NYC Community Fund. So it's been a great learning experience, and it's exciting to be on this call with you all and meet you.
Thank you. And Jordan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Goldberg. I'm the policy director at the Primary Care Development Corporation. I just joined the staff of that organization less than a year ago, and we sort of rejoined this coalition recently. So it's nice to see you all and meet you all. The Primary Care Development Corporation is a CDFI. I think Tom just mentioned it. We invest in primary care. We through the CDFI world, but solely focused on primary care and a lot of FQHCs and things like that. And I'm completely new to CDFIs. I spent the last 15 years in the reproductive health rights and justice movement, and I'm a policy attorney by training. So I do our policy work.
Thanks, Jordan. Howard?
Thank you. I'm Howie Banker, representing the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Zara Tun, who's Director of Lending there, and Pamela Sa, who's the new VP at the center. And our CDFI is Sustainable Neighborhoods. Sustainable Neighborhoods is originated over 3,000 mortgages in New York State, almost all to folks in foreclosure and some rehab loans in New York City, and is running the Housing Assistance Fund now in coordination with New York State HCR. So very happy to be here.
Thanks, Howie. I know that we're glad to have Linda McFarlane on the call. She's the president of the board of the New York State CDFI Coalition, but she has no mic. So she's conveyed her delight in being here. Why don't we just, I'm calling people in the order that they are on my screen, but why don't we continue with the other folks who are working with Howie? So that's Pamela and Zara Tun.
I could go if that's okay. Oh, Pamela is speaking. You know what, Pamela, go ahead since you're on camera.
Hi, I'm Pamela Sa. I'm the new Chief Program Officer at Center for New York City Neighborhoods, new to CDFI work and delighted to be here.
Thank you.
And I think Pamela and Howie said most of it, so I will keep it short and brief. My name is Zara Tun. I am the Director of Lending with Sustainable Neighborhoods, which is our wholly owned subsidiary of the Center for NYC Neighborhoods.
Great, thank you. I'm going to call on Nancy Karen, who I know is not Rodney Santiago.
Oh, Ron, that's how did that happen? Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Karen. I'm Executive Director at Bach Capital Corp. We're based in Brooklyn, and we lend us to small businesses throughout the New York City metropolitan area. And I'm very, very pleased to be here.
Thanks, Nancy. Now, you all have moved around on my screen a little bit as people have dropped in and dropped out. So I've got about 5 more people to call on. And then I'm going to say anybody that hasn't spoken, feel free to introduce themselves. So Jessica Haller, please.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I am Legislative Counsel in Assemblymember Fahey's office. I'm new to CDFIs, and I'm just here to learn, excited to learn.
Well, we are delighted to have you. And for those who are not following, keeping score at home, Assemblymember Fahey is the chair of the Assembly Banks Committee. So we're delighted to have you here, Jessica. Vera Booker.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vera Booker. I'm the Compliance Administration Manager at True Fund. I report to Aisha Benson, and looking forward to all of the great things that you guys have for this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Vera. Why don't we hop over to Aisha then and have her say hi.
Hi, everyone. Aisha Benson, driving on the highway, but happy to be here. True Fund Financial Services, we are headquartered in New York and provide loans and complimentary business advisory services to small businesses and nonprofits across the state.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Brian?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Chu. I'm the chair of the Habitat CDFI. Pleasure to work with Karen, Tom, and Charlotte, doing great work there. When I'm not doing that, I'm a partner at the firm Goldstein Hall, where attorneys representing developers doing affordable housing in the city and state of New York and other jurisdictions. And I'm happy to contribute here and listen to what all you great people have to say. I do apologize in advance. I do have to hop off at 12:30, so excuse my early leave. So.
Thank you. We've got just 2, 3, 4 more people to introduce. So John Felton, I want to know if you have power up there in Southern Chautauqua County. Looks like you do. Oh, you have power, but no audio. Sorry about that. It's not because you're muted. We've had this problem before with your computer. Sorry, guy. Well, John Felton is the treasurer of the New York State CDFI Coalition Board, and he's in Southern Chautauqua County, which is southwestern New York State, and we're delighted to have him here. Giovanna Bracchi, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So glad to be here. I'm Giovanna, Director of La Fuerza CDC. We're a small CDFI based out of Long Island, primarily serving minority and women-owned small businesses with microloans and business development services. Nice to see everyone.
Thanks, Giovanna. And Yanush?
Hey, everyone. My name is Yanush Samagaraja. I work at Weedy up in Buffalo, New York. We have a CDFI where we're doing microlending, and then we also have a business incubator for food service businesses and retail businesses.
Thanks, Yanush. And Pia?
Hello, everyone. I'm Pia Longarini. I'm part of the True Fund team. I'm AVP of Program Operations and Compliance. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And I had to go to my next screen for Christina, please.
Everyone, I'm Christina Sober. I'm the CEO at Cooperative Federal in Syracuse, New York.
We are so glad to have all of you here today. So now I'm going to give you a quick intro to our featured speaker, Jennifer Rutledge. Oh, I was just going to say who I don't no longer see on the screen, which is cause for panic, but it's because I changed screens. Okay. Jennifer understands that she's principal of Delphi Consultants, and she'll be leading our conversation today. Jennifer understands that for CDFI leaders and others who have been deeply engaged in eliminating disparities in under-resourced, underserved communities, the pursuit of social justice is not new. So she brings 35 years of experience to us. And through this discussion, we hope to provide tools and techniques that will help move our organizations forward in our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see my screen in just a moment, I hope?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for taking the time to introduce yourself to us or to me, so that I have some background on who's in the mix, so to speak, and who's in our discussion. We are planning for 3 of these, as you know, 3 facilitated discussions designed to provide tools and techniques for coalition members to move their organizations forward in their commitment to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to address any challenges, barriers to equity, inclusion, and economic justice that faced by their communities. Each one of our roundtables will have a theme. This one, we're going to spend time on the results of the survey. There was great information provided in the survey about how to address DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion in organizations, what organizations are doing. And there was also a lot of feedback around wanting to know what should be done. So we're going to talk about the survey first. And then we'd like to hear from you some items around, progress and steps you've taken since you completed the survey. As Colleen indicated, we sent this survey out a long time ago. And you may have done things, those steps were, what actions you've taken, and then finally setting our stage for moving forward. That's the agenda for today. And yes, we will share this PowerPoint. No need to take notes because there's such good information coming out of the survey. You should have this, this summary. And then in roundtable 2, we were going to do a poll, but really it's about the homework that I'll share with you at the end of this session. And our homework is really going to be about and thinking about the challenges, additional information on progress, but addressing the challenges and stumbling blocks and barriers and thinking about what they are and how to go about addressing them. And then finally in roundtable 3, we'll talk about and what you've asked for, not only what the coalition can do to help support you in this work and on your journey, but also, some of the exemplary practices that have risen to the top in a summary fashion. And then any next steps. So that's how each one of these roundtables will move forward during each one of these roundtables. I do have a couple of ground rules though, and with this discussion, and they really revolve around the big buckets of respect and safe space. Respect variety of perspectives. We're on different paths, both organizationally, different places on a path, and we're on different places on our own personal journey. So respect for the variety of backgrounds and perspectives. Make a commitment to do your part. Participate when asked and flow in and flow out, if you will, to allow space for others. And we want to be honest, but we also want to maintain the confidentiality of what's being shared. We'll talk about how we share the information, but we need to make sure that this is a safe space for folks to really talk about what's on their minds and what their organizations have done or not done, and what they should be doing. of course, treating each other as equals. And if you know, we all have some form of privilege. This is not a DEI workshop, but we all have some form of privilege. But that if you have privilege, we use our privilege, our position, and our power in productive ways to move us forward. If we must disagree, let's keep it civilized as you define civilized. And as I said, safe space with no hint or notion of retaliation, even judgment around this. Those are my ground rules. Can we live with those? I'll take head nods, any kind of indication. Okay, let's move forward then. So the first stop on our journey is to look at the survey results. And as I said, there were thank you to everybody. There were some wonderful comments, just really thoughtful, well thought out and well expressed comments around the commitment and the work that is being done within the coalition membership on DEI. Almost half of those who are paid members responded to the survey, and 94% stated that their organizations have been intentional in their commitment to and support of DEI. 67% though said that they have not financially supported DEI training or education for their boards. Keep that in mind. Also, there was a high recognition that and indication that reputation and relationships with communities served are good, but many acknowledge that there is more they should be doing and they will be doing. And as I said, organizations are at different places in their DEI journey, and there's a wide range of places to start for the coalition in providing assistance, education, resources, and support. The key results show that organizations have demonstrated support in, I would say, some commitment and support to and support for DEI and all of the major categories that we look at when we do conduct assessments around what organizations are doing, from composition to policies and practices, to plans and strategies, programs, services, education and training, communications, stakeholder feedback and evaluation, and vendors and suppliers, purchasing and procurement. The level of commitment to the organization and begins with, I think, in looking at, or at least one of the vital statistics is composition. Composition of the staff, composition of the board. Not only did we have high levels of compositions that reflect the community served, but as you also noted, you have advisory groups and DEI committees and other places for diversity and equity and inclusion to be incorporated in your commitment as you look at your stakeholders' involvement. The commitment to DEI has, as I said, been intentional, it's been articulated, and it's been financially supported and education and training has been financially supported for staff. We've also had about 60% of the respondents said that they have a DEI committee, DEI task force, and about 40% say they have a DEI function of some sort. It's a standalone function. Also, that the organizations, again, said that financially supporting training and workshops for the Are there any questions on any of that so far?
How do we stack up, Jennifer, against other organizations that you've worked with? I know that we're an association, not a unit, but broadly, how does the CDFI landscape look as compared to other groups that you work with?
I have to tell you, I like these stats a lot. I like these stats a lot. When I looked at the details, and this presentation has details in it around staffing. Let me just kind of pull some of this up. I just thought these stats were really, really good. And what members went on to say about their staffing and where folks were in leadership, and the diversity of leadership, the diversity of staff, and how they engaged staff in looking at communications, reaching out to stakeholders, positioning the organization in communities. I thought this was all fabulous. I thought this was well done. And I thought that folks could learn from one another in this. If we found a way to share the information as to who is doing what. Because as you know, the survey was anonymous, and we like that, and we support that. But I also thought that the information around board and committee makeup and advisory groups and advisory committees all were really good, and that there were DEI, REDI, IDEA, whatever acronyms you use, there were committees that were made up of internal folks, and some had mixed, internal, external. And then there were ERGs, or employee resource groups, in some of the CDFIs. I thought all of these are all exemplary practices. And I thought it was just terrific. I do think some more work needs to be done with the board, but here's the thing. I wrote Building Board Diversity back in 1994. How long ago was that? I'm still working with boards on this. So I think this is fairly typical. I also liked the notion that, and that DEI was being embedded in policy, in plans, in organization-wide practices, in intentional ways, and that there was evaluation of current policies, either done by an outside person or the organization doing it internally. That their programs and services were intentionally targeted, that and looking at things like lending requirements, loan products, this really gets to the equity. This really gets to the equity issue, and taking people where they are and helping them to move forward, recognizing that there are different starting points and different obstacles that folks face, and looking at our products, our practices, our policies, our requirements, and determining where the barriers are. Exemplary practice right from the beginning, and being intentional in targeting our programs and our services, making sure that they are responsive to the needs. Then making sure that staff had the tools, the resources, the support, the training. I thought that was fabulous. One of the things that I really truly loved was that, the racial equity discussions at staff meetings on a regular basis, an annual calendar of training. I said one, and then the third was that webinars by people who actually spoke Spanish were created by people who actually spoke Spanish, not translated into Spanish. That's fabulous. And of course, being a small businesswoman, I love the vendor and supplier diversity. policies, making sure, looking at where are we spending our money? Who is actually benefiting from doing business with us? And not only looking at the amounts, but also looking at not only looking at the percentage, but also looking at the total amounts. Loved it. These are all exemplary practice. Finally, in community engagement and the like, lots of client feedback, lots of partnerships, talked about partnerships and providing technical assistance, boards and councils and advisory groups, as I said, and then the perceptions were mostly positive, but I got the sense that that the member organizations are really conscious, if you will, of making sure that that remains. And I find this a lot with organizations, that in some instances, we're focused on DEI now, we're on that path now, but there was some history at some point that we have to get past, and we have to, with different communities, and we have to figure out, we're still making up ground, if you will, in our reputation based on that history. And so we have to continue to be intentional, vigilant, and, kind of inclusive in the way ensuring that our feedback comes to us and that we are viewed as and respected as authentic in our efforts. So I got that sense as well. And then when I started in this work 35 years ago, when I started in this work, all folks were doing in diversity was going to celebrations or having celebrations. But now celebrations are being built in, but not just celebrations. And not just participating in culturally specific celebrations, but also supporting and sponsoring and celebrations and conferences and lunches and speakers bureaus, and making sure that our people are recognized internally for their support of our initiatives and our direction. There was some and celebrating and acknowledging diversity, making sure our communications always, or most times, we look at our communications not only for inclusion, but how our clients, how our communities are positioned in our promotional materials, in our communications, in our media, making sure that they are all accessible, elevating and spotlighting and highlighting different communities as we, in our publications and internally and externally. And one group said that their external communications were always reviewed by the most diverse group of people within their organization. I like that as well. There is some work that has to be done around accessibility and physical spaces, but we were focused in on mostly racial and multicultural diversity. So, but you have to ask, because of intersectionality, those communities are not monolithic. So we do have to ask that question, and it's not always easy money-wise, but it's an easy fix or an easy, at least examination. And maybe there is some so-called low-hanging fruit or opportunity to ensure that venues are physically and physical spaces, virtual meetings, etc., are accessible.
Can you explain what you mean by this particular last statement?
Mm-hmm. What I mean is that we need to put it on our radar to always ask or always examine or always explore the accessibility of our physical spaces and venues that we use. Is it truly accessible? Where's the ramp? You know, where are the restrooms and what do they look like? Is our audio visual and our even in our virtual world, are we following an accessibility guide? And we can, and I will send information on this to Colleen, but we have to recognize that as we look at things like culture and ethnicity and race, that there's this intersectionality, that, you know, different intersectionalities that we should also take into account if we're talking about equity.
And this could even extend to non-gendered bathrooms or,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
using titles that are not, you know, putting your pronouns in your email signature, you know, so it's all those things.
And so we asked what organizations could be doing and what initiatives they should do. And some of the major themes is that we need to go deeper. We need to address and examine, we need to examine and then address systemic issues and barriers. We need to continue to educate, train, and develop staff and board, including leadership. And we need to assemble, you know, best practices and examples. I want to stop there for a moment and tell you about this, though. We need to do so in that assembling best practices and examples. We need to recognize the diversity of the organizations, and we're all at different places. Also, we need to recognize that everything is evolving around this work. So what was workable, doable, and even acceptable last year or 2 years ago or 5 years is not today. You know, we need to keep on top of it. So best is a moving target. In fact, I use the word exemplary, not best. Best is a moving target in this work, and it is hard, and we will make mistakes, but there's life after mistakes, and the mistakes means that we learn. We can't always make mistakes and think, you know, and move forward, but, you know, we don't have mistakes if we don't take action. You know, we don't make mistakes if we don't take action. So we need to make sure that examples have to be adapted for where our organization is, who our people are, and what our values are, and how we move forward, what our plans are, our priorities, etc. Because this is embedded. This should be embedded or woven into the fabric of our organizations. Also, assessment of our impact, yes, and a systematic approach to garnering feedback. And again, I want to highlight, when thinking about those two things, let's talk about impact. And if we're really going to use an equity lens, a diversity and equity lens, people-centered lens, we will disaggregate the data. We'll disaggregate the data. So what's happening in one part of our community or to one group within our community may not be happening to another group. And so not only noticing, you know, differences, but inequities. The disparities are the differences, the inequities are the result of the systemic barriers and history and all of that people have faced within a certain group. And so disaggregating data is going to be important. It's wonderful to talk about BIPOC-owned businesses, but there may be, and women-owned businesses, but there may be something happening differently to Black businesses than Asian American businesses than white women businesses.
I want to drop a pin in that, specifically as CDFIs grapple with impact data, to talk about after Jennifer wraps her presentation when we go into our conversation after this.
And so I'm just about done. I just said, you know, there also were additional comments that I thought were wonderful. Introducing belonging That has more to do with, and it not more to do, but starts internally with your employee population and moves externally to your community, hearing what others are doing, building the representation on our board, recognition, training, HR function with DEI responsibilities. That makes sense if you're not establishing a DEI function, ensuring that at least within the HR function it is built in. Starting to think about reparations, talk about going deep, looking at our loan documents and requirements, etc. All good stuff. This was really a terrific introduction for me to the work that you're doing in this, and very, very meaningful. And again, I went through this pretty quickly, but we're going to provide, we provided the report, but we'll also provide this presentation. Let me take one or two questions and then I'll move on to my question.
So very specifically, what I wanted to ask in terms of the data and the impact reporting is, and this is where I want you all to talk. Our CDFIs, are you finding that your funding partners, whether lenders or grant makers, are requiring demonstrable commitment to DEI and those numbers broken down in a different way than you have before? And are you having difficulty providing those numbers? Somebody's got to go first. Nobody's making loan or nobody's making investments or grants and requiring you to show.
Well, I'll start. So yeah, it's getting harder in the time. The grantors and funders are asking more questions every year. They want more questions, and you know, at the credit union level, and we look at how our cores are set up to capture the data of the members that we have, and we're just not set up, you know, to do it. So we're finding how are we going to have to change our systems in order to get that data on there that we can pull reports out of it. So it's evolving and getting harder.
Micah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the conversations that we're having internally is the complexity of identity. And so, you know, we finance mostly cooperative businesses where there's joint ownership by a large number of people. If those people all have the same demographic identity along whatever vector we're thinking about, gender, race, et cetera, then it's easy to characterize the co-op as that demographic identity. And sometimes that's the case. And other times it's an integrated group that has a range of different identities. And because there are not a lot of groups out there financing cooperative businesses, it's not there aren't widely known solutions. And so when funders are asking for that, then we get tripped up a little bit.
I'm also thinking, you know, when we talked about there is no one size fits all solution for New York State. You know, I'm looking specifically at, you know, the Kevins and the Christinas and the Ithaca, Chad. No, yes, I forget who's from Ithaca. You know, when you're upstate, is it more difficult to kind of produce these numbers that are going to be attractive to lenders or grant makers? You know, I know that John Felton, who might not still be on the call because he was having mic problems, you know, in Southern Chautauqua County, it's not a very racially diverse area, you know, so he struggles. He's back. Okay. Is your audio working now, John?
You're on mute though, John.
Now he's on mute.
No, it's not working.
Sorry, guy.
But let me chime in here, and I want to say this. It's based on community makeup. I mean, period. You know, I work with clients all the time, and you know, I say, okay, what's your community? What are the community demographics? That's how you define your racial, cultural, ethnic, whatever dimensions of diversity you define it based on the base. Now, if your base could be more, because there is more of, there emerging groups or groups moving in, or you just haven't counted them or serviced them and they still exist. That's different. But I had, in the beginning of my work in this early on, I had a woman tell me at a panel, sitting on a panel, she said, yeah, but Jennifer, there's no Asian Americans in Ohio. I'm like, what? But, but I mean, this is really early in the late 80s. But if whatever your community makeup is, what is the composition? And if you can speak to then how you impact the composition, the various groups within the composition. That's how I view this.
And John just shared that it's not only, what you said, Jennifer, best is a moving target. It's not just who's in your community now, but what sections of the populace are increasing. You have to be, you have to be anticipating. You have to be like the hockey player who's looking not where the puck is now, but where it's going to be in 3 seconds. So
we're fine. We have to cover a bigger area, right? I mean, it's very rural where we are. Christina at least has the city of Syracuse she can deal with. We're out in the middle of the Finger Lakes, and we really got to look, and we've got to be very intentional of how we're finding the communities that we're going into. We can't just generally advertise to the whole population that this is, because that wouldn't suffice. So
that's right.
We've got to be very intentional. It's more grassroots, more hand holding, those small conversations. So it's slower.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you know this, and this is your target, and this is what we mean when we say our communications, our media, our publications. You look at who you're targeting, and you make it language appropriate. You make it accessible. You make it in the formats that work, methods that work. And then it may be different for another community. Because when I talk about accessibility, I'm not talking about any, just folks with impairments. I'm talking about people without access, period.
Right.
Which may be broadband, it may be anything. And how do we reach those targets? And that means we have to sit down and do this. The other thing about data, I'm gonna go back to that. Yes, many of my clients are struggling with their systems because they haven't, but people who support them want to know, given the demographics of the communities that you serve, what are you, what is your service population and what's your impact? Okay, here's, I just wanted to say, let's see. Yeah, there's no breakdown by staff size of organizations. We can do that, though. We can ask that optionally or include that in any additional follow-up surveys. It's a good question. And then we said we're now about to ask about LGBTQIA, though we do not collect that information as a practice. And again, this is all self-identifying most times in the ways in which you collect it. So you may not have, 90% of that group respond. You may have only 50% of that group respond voluntarily. It's fine, go with it and move forward, but ask. And make sure that folks know what you're going to do with the information, that you're going to use it in aggregate. There's no individually identifiable, and then here's the purpose and why it benefits them as well as you and your organization.
I have another question actually that may be more of a segue into the homework part of this discussion.
Okay.
Because it's more internal. All right. We're not looking at an external audience. I've done some prep work for this series, and I was reading an article from the World Economic Forum that reported that there's not only a moral imperative for DEI, but also an economic one.
Always.
Are any of you seeing results yet in employee retention, morale, or performance based on this, new focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Do, 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 do.
I can give you a non-quantifiable answer. I mean, just basically say yes, Colleen. I mean, I think we've been really intentional around our recruitment practices by really kind of broadening the pond and stop, to use a fishing analogy, to stop fishing in the same ponds all the time and drawing the same sorts of candidate pools. So just organically or just anecdotally, I would say in the last 10 hires that we've done, I would say probably a full 40 or 50% represent a community other than white, which is, and we regularly poll our staff around how they self-identify and to try and collect stats, et cetera. But I would say, I think certainly, again, anecdotally, I know that my staff is hungry for this information. We're really invested in it and they're impatient for more. And yet, of course, everybody's already doing their full-time job. So it's a real balance, I would say, but we're seeing real uptick. One of the challenges we face is in board recruitment. We are just polling pervasively white. And my struggle, and maybe this is a conversation for another day, I don't want to take these last 6 minutes, but one of the challenges is around how do you, I'm going to say this awkwardly, so I'll apologize in advance while I learn to be better, but I am unashamedly using language and kind of apologizing later. But I feel like, how do we approach and prospect authentically without this sort of the tokenism that can go with that, right? And because I'm so aware of it, it's like, oh, I love you, you're amazing, you're a Black woman, would you like to be on my board?
Right.
It just, that's always the lion in the living room with us, right?
That's right, Karen.
Yeah.
And let me just tell you, and as I said, I wrote this book in 1994. It's out of print now, but there's a lot of books out there now and a lot of help on this now. We definitely will talk about this next week. This is near and dear to my heart, and this is the call I always get.
Yeah. You're awesome.
That's his name. You described my life.
Yeah. Listen, I gotta believe that is everybody's common refrain. So.
Yeah, it's like, okay, but we will talk more in depth about challenges, and especially since I do believe that this was one of the areas that you're not alone in seeking to build your more diverse board. There is this question around, let's see. Let's see. I wonder if we can, I think you put it, was it you, Colleen, that put in the, would it be okay if we share the results across tabs with the whole group? It was anonymous.
Yeah, and I had one question, and I just said, look, this is not the way that Jennifer has presented the results of the poll to us. It's not like it's in a spreadsheet with hidden columns that you can unhide or a PDF that you can unredact. So there's nothing in there that could link an answer to an institution. So I'm going to go ahead and send that around to the group. Because I do think, I will echo what Jennifer said when she and I first started talking about reviewing the results and trying to come up with some, discussion of where people are, where a lot of people are, where no one is, trying to identify those areas where people are already doing work and an area that maybe really needed some more attention. We were both really struck by the candor and the thoughtfulness of the responses.
Absolutely.
So for those of you who responded, really deep appreciation, because that's the only way that we can do this, is if we all participate. So I feel like this first meeting has been a lot of Jennifer talking and going over what you all disclosed back in November. But in 2 weeks, when we come back together after some homework, I do hope that we can have more of a wide-ranging conversation about what people have been doing and where you're hitting some obstacles.
So here's well, Colleen, you just set the stage for the homework. There's what you've been doing since the survey. You're going to get the information now so you can review it. If there's anything that arises that you'd like to supplement what you've been doing since you filled out the survey, or what may not be reflected in the survey that you're doing, that's fine. We'd also like you to give us permission, if at all possible, for us to share what we talk about in that regard next time. Because again, we like peer learning, peer-to-peer learning and exchange. And then I'll think about one, no more than two, challenges, stumbling blocks, barriers, something you're facing that we should speak to and help you find workable, viable, realistic, I won't say solutions because we're on this journey, but let's say steps to take that will lead us to solutions or addressing those things. 1 to 2. Karen, have you done your homework already or identified board recruitment? But so if you can think about 2 things, reviewing the information and adding anything, and anything you would like to share, you'd be willing to share with other members of the coalition, especially. And then secondly, challenges, hiccups, stumbling blocks, barriers, 1, no more than 2. Okay.
One of the things, again, that I've seen in some of the other programs that I've visited or reading that I've done is that so much of this is like falling to the same people, and that people are asked and invited to serve on DEI committees, but nobody's making any more hours in the day. So is that part of one of the stumbling blocks? I will also ask if I could, if you're not on the chat, if you're just listening, could you please turn your camera on just for a minute so I can get a screen grab and see everybody's smiling faces?
Jordan, we can certainly put these in writing and get them to you. No problem whatsoever. But I want to go back to what Colleen said about the same people doing this. And by the way, oftentimes overburdening people of color because of our lived experience, because we are the targeted groups, but not really thinking about functionally who should be doing this based on their job and holding those folks accountable. Major exhaustion factor.
Yeah. For
us. So, okay. Is that as many people as we can on?
I think it is. I've taken a print screen, but here, let me do the low-tech backup. Everybody smile. Okay.
All right, here we go. So is everybody clear? Any questions?
Okay, I know that people are going to start bailing out because it's past 1 o'clock. So as we prepare for next week, or for 2 weeks from now, just on behalf of the New York State CDFI Coalition, thank you to Marissa and to Jennifer and to everyone who joined us online. I hope that we have inspired you to further explore how your institution can establish policies that support diversity, equity, and inclusion, and continue to lead the way in making change. Thank you all for all you do. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.